Hi, hi, everybody. So my name is CJ Hedgepeth, and I am a school-based speech therapist. In my currently in my clinical fellowship year. Um, I am a person who stutters. I have stuttered pretty much my whole life, and have since coming into this field have really found a passion for learning and helping people who stutter. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Schlemmer. I am a speech therapist. I'm also a person who stutters. I work in the schools as well, and I also do private practice part time. But yeah, same thing with CJ. I obviously, growing up as a person who stutters, I had a very important interest with it. And there's been a lot of new research coming out that's kind of showing, we potentially might be wanting to like switch the way we view things. So we just kind of wanted to create this. CJ and I are actually in the same NSA chapter. And so our whole chapter created this presentation last year. And so we presented it 2 times and we've gotten good feedback. So we decided to try to reach out to NSA and see if they would let us share it, and here we are.
This is where we kind of wanted to start off, as what does stuttering mean to you? And I know Lauren and I we kind of start off with this, but we were hoping to open this up to kind of the group. And I can start us off. So stuttering to me, when I think about stuttering, it has been kind of like my worst nightmare, but at the same time, it has been kind of like a blessing in my life. And, it's been something that has, shown me a lot of empathy, has taught me how to be, it has taught me how to be empathetic towards a lot of different individuals, and has taught me patience. So that's kind of what stuttering means to me.
I'll go too, but CJ, you kind of said exactly what I was planning on saying. Growing up, I viewed stuttering as this horrible thing that kind of interfered with everything. And so then, as I got older, I decided to look into a different kind of therapy, and that really increased my overall self confidence. Um, and it continues to d- do so as well. And that's kind of carried over into the therapy that I give with all of my clients too. So, yeah, I think I can kind of see it. If I want to see it as something negative, I can, but I'd really try to focus on the po- positives. Is there anyone who wants to share, whether you're someone who stutters, an SLP? Um, Anyone?
Yeah, and if it helps, you can just unmute yourself and just kind of
I have a share. So when I was in grad school during clinic, when you're being graded and there's the mirror and your supervisor's watching you give a test to a child who stutters or not stutters. But anyways, if you're a person who stutters, you can't change the words to the test, can you? Or it's not standardized anymore. So your supervisor's behind the mirror, the parent or parents of a child and the other graduate students are welcome to watch each other. For me, that was a nightmare. Um, and then when I got out in the working world, I began at a hospital because my goal was to do skilled care in hospitals and then build a practice for stuttering. And I carried that same thought pattern into my early year to year and a half where I was afraid to stutter with doctors and nurses, family members, the whole thing, that anxiety. So the meaning that I had for stuttering created all of my fear and anxiety, but I had to confront it for reasons like giving a test that's standardized. I couldn't change words, but my stuttering when I read out loud all the way through childhood was horrible. Anyways, um, having to change the meaning of stuttering was just so critical. And I did that a long time ago because I've been licensed now for 33 years. So completely changing my thought processes about stuttering changes the meaning of stuttering. Thanks for the share there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So, we wanted to start off by just kind of going over a brief overview of what stuttering is, especially for those of us that are here who are not speech therapists and might not know this stuff. So in terms of stuttering, right? We first kind of think about the physical and the audible characteristics of stuttering. So those can include whole, part, and phrase length repetitions, blocks, and then we look at the physical characteristics, and that's just that physical tension. So in a lot of individuals who stutter, they might have physical tension that can look a number of different ways. That can be hand squeezing, facial movements and so forth. So in terms of like what causes stuttering, that's still unknown within the field and so forth. That we don't know what causes stuttering. We don't know why some of us who stutter, why we stutter, and why some individuals don't stutter. But what we know so far is that there is a neurological component to stuttering. And that's there's a lot of recent research that's coming out that's really kind of highlighting that, and that there is a strong genetic link to stuttering. So our focus of our presentation here is to consider focusing therapy on the experience of stuttering. And a question that we have gotten asked before, I know I've gotten asked before, is, okay, when did this shift change? Because a lot of people who are older who may have stuttered, they remember therapy being, okay, here are these strategies, practice them. Well, so this chart that's over here on the right, that is the World Health Organization International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health, or WHO ICF framework, and this is a widely used framework to a widely used framework to categorize a disability, and for many years, stuttering was just classified as the physical and the audible characteristics of stuttering. Therefore, that was all that was really treated. Well, in 2019, various researchers kind of got together to hope to change how stuttering was defined in this framework, and they did, and they achieved that, and now the experience of stuttering is included in the definition of what it means to be a person who stutters. So so here is just some kind of here is just some prevalence and incidence data. So about 5% of all children will go through a period of stuttering that lasts 6 months or more. 75% of those who begin to stutter will ultimately kind of just stop stuttering. And so this leaves about 1% of the population with long-term stuttering. So to me, when I see that, I see, well, the 5% of all children, that's a lot of children. And those who end up having a long-term stutter, that's still, even though like in one way, that's not a lot of that's not a large percentage, but that's still a lot of people. And so with that being said, Lauren, I guess that leads you to this one.
And to answer Teresa's question, it's 1% worldwide. Okay, so the stuttering iceberg. I love this. I use this a lot in therapy too. For those of you who do not know, I'm going to kind of briefly go over it. So when you see an iceberg, the top part is usually the smaller part, and the bottom part is the larger part that you can't really see. So how this relates to stuttering, the top part is, of course, everything that we can see slash hear. And then the bottom part is the stuff that the person who stutters goes through, whether it's their thoughts, feelings. It's just everything that people cannot see. So as you can kind of see, if we don't target the bottom half of the iceberg, it's just going to keep rising up and up and up. So if we shrink it from the bottom, then it'll shrink the entire iceberg. So that's kind of a big goal in therapy, to really target the parts that we can't see. That takes a lot of work though, but it can be done. Now, taking a look at a few of these, I would like to kind of like talk about if anyone here who stutters feels any of these. So the next, yeah, okay. So what is the biggest component of your iceberg? For me, I would have to say shame. Just because you want to say something, but then you end up not saying something, and then you start to feel bad for yourself, and then it kind of starts to build up and up and up. CJ, what about you?
For me, I think the I think for me the biggest part of my iceberg would probably be would probably be my anxiety around stuttering. I know, like, I mean, I am 25 years old, and I still, like, whenever I get a phone call, like, there is a rush of just like nervousness that just flows through my body. And whenever I have to, talk to anybody, I just, it just affects me so much, because, you know, like, I get nervous that I'm going to stutter a lot, and then they're going to think different things about me, and so forth. So that part for me is my biggest iceberg, my biggest part of the iceberg.
All right, so we're briefly going to talk a little bit about assessment. I think the key things to point out are, it's more than just a disfluency count. I feel like the field has gotten into this habit of, if they're not hitting a certain count, then they won't qualify. But you really have to think about too that one of the main things about stuttering that makes it so frustrating is that it is variable. So one day you could feel like you're not stuttering at all. The day after that, you feel like you're stuttering on every single word. So I think that while in the past we used to rely on that a lot, nowadays we're kind of seeing that, oh, how are we going to take account and say that that's how the student or the client is going to be all the time, because that's just not true. There are also different speaking and environments that could also amp it up as well. So we have to take that into account too. And then also kind of tying it all together, quality of life. We need to make sure that there's that adverse impact. Is the client, are they comfortable with their speech? Do they struggle? Do they have tension? Do they want to make a change? Because sometimes there are people who stutter very easily, and they don't feel like they need to change at all. Um, Avoidance behaviors too, as we were kind of talking about, stuttering's pretty tricky. It's almost like the more you try to not stutter, the more tension that builds up. So as CJ was saying, a lot of kids will start squeezing their hands or they'll blink their eyes. They'll try to push the sounds out. I actually had a student who came into speech the other year, I believe it was, and she was like, "Hey, Miss Schlemmer, I found this really cool trick." And I was like, "Okay, what is it?" And she said that if she squeezed her hands, then the tension would be in her hands and not her voice. But then I kind of told her, "Well, you're still having tension. You're just not feeling it in your f- face anymore. You're feeling it in your hands. So it doesn't really get rid of it. So I wouldn't consider that like a trick." Um, and then emotional effects too, as we were talking about the bottom part of the iceberg. We really want to kind of talk to our clients and kind of see, okay, are they gonna like let us in and tell us about what's going on, how they feel, the thoughts that they have. So yeah, just in general, there's a lot more than just counts. So I want you to kind of take that in mind too. Okay, and personally, I think the coolest thing about therapy is that we can counsel, right? I see a hand for a question. Um, Go ahead, really quick.
Hi, this is Rebecca. Sorry to kind of interrupt you, but from the previous slide, I just had a question. Are you guys familiar like with the OASIS for kids? And I was curious, I'm an SLP, and as SLPs who stutter, I found it to be like a really valuable assessment. Like I think for my kids, and I just kind of wondered your guys with that kind of extra insight of also being people who stutter, how you felt about that during an assessment.
I think it's awesome. I would say the O- 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 OASIS is also my top one that I try to use too, because it gives you a score too. So you can kind of use that to kind of replace or at least kind of add to disfluency counts there too. But I think it's great. I also think too for kids who are a little bit shyer, having them write out answers or at least circle answers. I think that sometimes is a little bit easier for them than having to kind of verbalize how they feel. But yes, good point. Yeah.
And if I can add to this, I just did the Oasis on a seventh grader a few weeks ago, and the for this is a student who you know um they don't have a lot of overt stuttering. They're more of what we would probably consider to be like a covert stutterer. But all their teachers were saying like, oh, they don't they don't stutter at all. Like they answer questions and stuff, and all that. So when I did it on him, he let like I found out so much, and how much stuttering was affecting all parts of the life, right? It was very eye-opening for me, and that's not stuff that I would have gotten had I just taken 300 word speech samples and counted how many times they stuttered. So yeah, definitely recommend the Oasis.
Thank you guys. I'm glad. I really like it too.
Great question. All right, so yes, counseling. This is super important because to really figure out how your students or clients tick, you need to kind of get to know them first. So building rapport is super, super important. And I think when you do that, you also need to have this education piece as well, because sometimes you'll be seeing kids who are pretty young, and if they don't know how we talk, where you have the brain and the mouth and the vocal folds and the lungs, all of that, they kind of won't really have a good place to start. So we want to make sure that we educate them on that, but also what stuttering is. Everyone kind of, I feel like, talks around the word stuttering, but I feel like we need to call it what it is. And then also, too, I think that the person who stutters is really the expert on their own speech, because just because two people stutter doesn't mean that they do it the same way. So I feel like once we build that rapport with those kids, then we can kind of ask them, well, how do you speak? Like, do you feel tension in the mouth, in the throat, your chest? Because it can change a lot. And speaking of changing too, stuttering can also change quite a bit. So having check-ins, right? So maybe I asked my student one day, like, hey, how have you been? How was your speech? And then one day they're like, oh, it's been pretty easy. But then the day after that, they're like, no, it's been pretty tough. So kind of just making sure that we're checking in with them each day. I'm going to pause too, because I have a question in the chat. Have you experienced using the OACs on individuals with autism and anxiety? I wasn't sure how much of the questions were answered from an autism anxiety perspective versus stuttering perspective, and whether the results were unreliable. Good question. I don't believe I have ever given the OASIS on someone with diagnosed autism and anxiety. CJ, do you know?
I don't. I have not done that. So
And could I clarify my question? The person I was assessing was a person who stuttered, who also had autism and anxiety, and therefore a lot of the questions and the way the OACs is presented, it was very unclear whether, you know, some of the answers were more related to this person's feelings of anxiety versus stuttering. So it was, I struggled with the results of the OACs for that particular case.
Yeah, that's tricky. I'm trying to think if I were in that situation. Ooh, that's tough. I would probably talk to them after that and kind of be like, hey, I know you have anxiety as well. Can you kind of tell me, do they interrelate? Does the stuttering make you a little bit more anxious and vice versa? Maybe see what they say, but that's actually a very good question.
yeah, and I also, I mean, and I could be wrong on this, because I have not given this assessment on a child who has autism, but I don't, the score you don't get is not it's not a standard score. It's just a kind of like a average score. So I don't think, if I'm understanding, like, it doesn't have to be, if I'm understanding your question, I don't think it's a matter of it being normed to individuals with autism or not. But I mean, I could be misunderstanding what the question is. So, but
I guess I would just say that, you know, when you're looking at eligibility under stuttering, for a person who doesn't have eligibility in the schools for autism, they were found not to be eligible. And I use the OACs as a measure to indicate they did meet eligibility in the schools because of their stuttering. And yet I was at the same time a little unsure of whether my interpretation of whether they met eligibility or not was accurate, given that they also have autism and anxiety. This one was just a one-off case, but it was a challenging one, and the OACs wasn't necessarily designed to kind of highlight those differences, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say too, there is a lot of overlap with all three of those anyway. So I mean, I feel like if the kid is having that impact, no matter what it is, I feel like if the stuttering's related, even in any kind of way, I mean, I think what you did was fair. So,
Thank you.
mhm. Okay. One more quick thing here. So small wins are huge because you wouldn't think that, you know, one of your students answering a question in class is like a big deal, but for them, it could be. And not necessarily them answering a question and not stuttering, but stuttering and answering it. So even if they do stutter, really make that a big thing. Like, wow, you said what you wanted to say. That is huge. That is awesome. Because a lot of times for kids who stutter, they think that, oh, well, everyone's supposed to be able to talk in class. But for them, it may be a little bit more stressful and challenging. So, really, just kind of like amping that up for them, right? You want to make sure that they're starting to feel more confident in their speech too. And then we do have a few types of therapies here that you guys can look into. I'm not really going to go over a lot of them. CJ, did you want to touch on any of
Sure.
them?
Yeah, well, and I'll just kind of run through them briefly. But so the types of therapies that involve counseling, and so they start with cognitive behavior therapy. In short, that's just looking at the past, right, and looking at what happened and talking about that and kind of exploring like how did that make them feel. So in a person who stutters, it could be oh, you know, last year in your English class, you know, your teacher made you, you know, read out loud, and you know, you stuttered a lot, and you know, and a lot of individuals in your class laughed at you. Like, how did that make you feel? You know, like why do you think they reacted like that? Why did you react the way you reacted? So that's kind of what that is, and helping them kind of explore that. And then in turn, solution focused brief therapy, that's kind of the opposite. That's looking at the future. So, you know, we talked about what happened in the past, right? Now, what can we do to help, you know, help you so in the future you feel more confident and comfortable, you know, talking in your class, or going and ordering food at a restaurant, or making a phone call, or I mean, the list can go on and on. My mindfulness, that's all about, you know, helping the individual who stutter kind of learn about their body and learn about where they're feeling tension. And, you know, to kind of touch on something that Lauren had mentioned, like helping them, you know, especially in our young in our young clients, you know, oh, you're feeling tension in your throat, right? Or you're feeling tension in your shoulders, or you know, oh, I see you're feeling tension, you know, in your hands because you're really squeezing them. And what can we do to help kind of release that tension and make it easier for you to communicate? And then lastly, avoidance reduction, which is just helping that individual who stutters, whether it's a whether it's a child or an adult, helping them, you know, overcome some of those fears, right? And overcome some of that avoidance, whether that be, you know, them not answering questions in class because they don't want to stutter. Well, what can we do to help you feel more comfortable answering questions? Because you know the answer, you're smart, you're capable, you can do it. So that's kind of a brief kind of summary of these four main ones. Okay, so for our speech therapists here, what do you feel like you are doing well in therapy when it comes to working with you know, working with individuals who stutter?
If you also have a fun activity that you want to share, feel free. I have a few that I can share too. So,
I can share For one student, I individualized their service so that they felt like they had a safe place to share. So without the individualization of the therapy session, they refused to touch on anything related to stuttering.
Absolutely. Awesome. In the chat, Amy said, being a safe space for the kids to share their experiences, which is awesome. Yeah, and I think having students one-on-one too, it helps a lot. I also think too, if you have two kids that are kind of on the same like path of their journey, having them together at times too is awesome. Just so they can kind of share their own stories as well.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we move on? Oh. Let's see. Improv. That I think that is great too. Absolutely. Yeah, especially improv using voluntary stuttering. So maybe you're improving calling someone on the phone, but you're trying to stutter to see if the other person will get like any reaction, or you're improving giving a presentation. So that could be good too. Anyone else? I have one that I want to share though.
Same here, but I can go last.
A PowerPoint to send to his teachers. Yeah, that's awesome too. Yep, that's great. One thing that I do too, I like to make this ladder craft. And so at the top of the ladder, you'll have speaking situations that are feared. And then as you go down, they kind of get easier and easier. So I like to talk about that to kind of figure out, what environments do we need to practice in, or what environments do we need to have goals for. Stuttering quizzes in boom cards. Yes, I do that too. Yep. And then they can share that with family and friends. Yeah, perfect. All right, CJ, I think you're up.
All right. So what I like to do, and I do realize that when it comes to working with my students who stutter, I am in a slight unique unique situation, because I use all the time my experience with stuttering, and I found that helps my students who stutter feel more comfortable talking about their experience as their experiences with stutter. So what I would recommend to speech therapists in here is, everybody, whether you are a speech whether you are a person who stutters or not, like, everybody has something that causes anxiety, right? And if you don't, you can make up one, and like use that, because I've found that really helps, especially some of my especially some of my teenagers who think they're kind of too cool to talk about their feelings or whatever. When I say, like, oh yeah, like yesterday, I really wanted to go to Chick-fil-A, but like I started driving, and then I got kind of scared about having to go through the drive-through, so I just ended up going home, and that kind of sucked. When I offer some of that up, then that I've found that really helps some of my students feel like, oh, and then they tell me kind of something that happened in their day or happened over their weekend, and then we can kind of explore that and talk about, okay, what did you do? How did you feel, and so forth, and what can you do maybe next time to make that easier for you. So that's my little take on it. Does anybody have anything to share before I move on to the next one?
Deborah in the group chat made a good point too. Groups. So NSA chapters, groups for kids. I know Friends does a lot too. So really educating your students and clients that there are other options to kind of meet pe- people who stutter, um, that can help them kind of connect to, and not feel as alone.
And to add to that, be so for me before I went to grad school, I sought out speech therapy myself because I was, I didn't know much about stuttering, aside from what I did know. And I was, kind of worried that like, oh, wait, I can't be a speech therapist and have a stutter. Like that makes no sense. Like, and so the summer the su- the summer before I started the summer before I started my program, I sought out speech therapy, and my speech therapist was wonderful. Like she kind of opened up my world and my eyes to all the stuff that we're talking about today. And got me connected with the NSA group and Lauren. And I feel and ever since I've been a part of this group, for the last 2 years now. And it has really, it's something I look forward to every month, during our meetings. And I get a lot out of just connecting with other people who stutter, in this format, rather than going to a speech therapist. So I really like that point of, groups and different avenues to get that connection with other people who stutter. So all right, so our next kind of prompt is for people who stutter. What do you wish your speech therapy did in therapy? Especially if you are a speech therapist who had speech therapy at a point in your life. So, and I can kind of start us off. So I was in speech therapy pretty much my whole life, on and off. And what my speech therapist when I was in middle school, really focused on kind of the strategy part. And the sessions, from what I remember, looked like I came in and oh, we worked on easy onset today. Here's this paragraph. I want you to read it, use easy onset. And that was kind of the therapy for me, and that's all I did. And and that really kind of made me not really like speech therapy. And I didn't want to go. I didn't want to participate because I felt like, well, I still stutter. Like even when I'm in class, like I'm still stuttering. So, you know, I guess it's my fault that I'm still stuttering because I'm not using my strategies appropriately, or that it was really, thinking back on it, I wish my speech therapist really had focused a lot on that experience of stuttering, because I remember there were plenty of times where I didn't answer questions, or I would, ask my teacher if I could do my presentation with just her rather than in front of everybody, because I was so afraid of stuttering in front of everybody. Um, so yeah, so that's just a little bit about what I wish my speech therapist did.
I can share too. I feel like kind of similar to CJ. I did a lot of strategies, which worked when I was thinking about them, but they never became automatic at all. And it also made me kind of sound like a Disney princess, and I didn't want to sound like that. So um, that just didn't work out for me. Additionally, too, I didn't find any other people who stuttered until I was in grad school, I think, when I joined um, an NSA group. And also, too, I don't think anyone ever told me that it's okay to stutter up until grad school, honestly. So I think really just making sure that students and kids know that, it is okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different way of talking. Um, yeah. Does anyone else have anything to say?
I just have a question. I have, I'm actually a graduate clinician, like I'm on a waiver here in California, but a lot of the parents are the ones pushing, right, for their kids not to stutter. So what do you do? I mean, I know you're saying let's accept that, which is great, but how do you talk to the parents about that?
It's a lot about facts. So if you lay them out to them, that's I feel like the only thing that you can do. CJ, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I am, and from what I've experienced, not only in some of the parents that the parents that I work with when it comes to my students, but also in my own parents. You know, here, I'll say it this way. And I had just tried this out the other day, and it still confirms this. But when you look up, my kid stutters, what do I do? One of the first things that pops up is you can see a speech therapist, and they can teach you strategies to help your kid stop stuttering. Like that's the first thing that pops up when looking on when that's the first thing that pops up when Googling stuttering and stuttering treatment. And I think a lot of, and just like Lauren said, like a lot of it is just education. And I've done, I mean, so far this year I've done this probably like 3 times where I've asked to kind of have I've asked to have a conference with a parent and just kind of explain to them like, okay, this is what stuttering is. This is what the current research says. And the focus of therapy is not to fix the stuttering, because I mean, there's no evidence to support that works. The focus of therapy is to help their confidence in communicating. And I have found in every single one of those times that I've done that so far, like the parent is very receptive to that once somebody sits down and explains it all to them. So I think that's really what it is. Because, like, I mean, most parents, if not all of them, are very well intentioned. I feel like, I mean, they all want the best for their kid, and they see their child and they are struggling and having a hard time speaking, and it's affecting them. Like, oh, what do they want to do? They want to fix them, like they want to help them. And so I've found that a lot of times it's just, that it's just that education piece and really educating the parent. And, I send a lot of resources, like, I mean, I've sent a lot of, especially for my pediatric clients, I've sent like handouts and stuttering, different videos out there, especially the stuttering therapy resources has some pretty good has some pretty good resources on their YouTube page that kind of explains stuttering. For my older students, I've sent like different handouts home, and links to the like links and links to things like this, like what we're doing today. Like I've sent them things like this, because yeah, like it's all that education and educating the parent on what stuttering is. Yeah, I don't know, Lauren, if you had anything else to add to that.
Yeah, 2 things. Deborah shared an article, and I just peeked at it, and it looks pretty good. So feel free to check out that. Thank you. And then what I was gonna say too was it's also super cool when you can teach your students about stuttering, and then they can take that home and share that with their parents too. It is really hard, especially right now, because we're in this kind of time where previously we used to really focus on like flu- this fluency counts, and we're going to do strategies and all this and that, and kind of making it sound like that it is going to cure it. But as the research comes out, we're kind of seeing that we don't want to go in on that front. Like we want to make sure that we're being very transparent about what stuttering is and what the chances are that kids will quote unquote spontaneously recover.
Okay, so the focus of therapy and the goals of therapy, right? So our consideration that we hope that you guys take away is is supporting is support is support is supporting your clients supporting your client's ability to communicate effectively, right? So that's that, knowledge piece, right? They are the experts in stuttering. Also will end up being their biggest own advocate, right? So you want them to know everything about stuttering. You want them to know, what we as speech therapists know about stuttering. So that way when in the future or, right now when they're in situations, they are equipped to be able to, advocate for themselves. And this can also pertain to the pediatric clients as well. They are more than capable of learning about stuttering. With some of my pediatric clients, I mean, yes, I may use things like, bu sticky speech and bumpy speech, to kind of represent, the types of stuttering. But, we talk about like, what happens with stuttering and how to kind of advocate for ourselves. So yeah, so that knowledge, and then the understanding of those techniques and the various different tension releasing tools, and the why we're working on, and the why we are working on those, right? So we want to help that client or help your student understand that, like, okay, when I use easy onset, right, that's not to not stutter. That's to help me because I'm having a block and my throat's tight. This is kind of helping to, relax that. And so then I could say what I want to say. And then, and then that self-advocacy piece. This is very important for those, for those teenagers and up, right? They will end up being their own biggest advocate. So if they really would feel more comfortable doing a presentation just in front of the teacher, right? Like, give them the tools to where they can initiate that. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be written down in an IEP for that to happen. Like, they can learn how to be an advocate, because if you think about it, after high school, they may not have an IEP to have all these, different accommodations listed in there for them. So, helping them learn how to advocate for themselves, and then helping them learn how to reduce those avoidant behaviors, and helping them recognize too when they are having those avoidant behaviors. So, a lot of times with my students, we'll talk about, like in your class, it's especially like I'll do a lot of I will do a lot of observations. So, and there's been times where I've observed a kid try to, tell something to the teacher, but then they're stuttering so much and they just stop. And then like one kid literally stopped and then tried to write down like what she said. And, we talked about that in therapy the next session, and like, oh, why did you do that? And helping them recognize like maybe they were avoiding stuttering, for a multitude of different reasons. But like, okay, what can we do next time? Maybe like, so you don't do that, and you can still tell your teacher what you wanted to tell them, even if it takes however long it takes and whatever it looks like. So that's what we would hope, that would be some, considerations when it comes to working with individuals who stutter, is supporting that client's ability to communicate effectively. And then goals can work on, can also focus on environments where stuttering is more affected. So in turn with our school age kids, like that can be in the classroom or in the lunchroom with their friends, right? Especially if they are saying that like, oh, they don't really talk a lot with their friends at lunch because it's so loud and nobody ever gives them time to say something, right? Well, you can work on that. You can help them feel more comfortable, participating in that setting. For our adults, right? If that is avoiding, answering phone calls, avoiding, avoiding going through drive-throughs, avoiding avoiding introducing yourself. Like that's a big thing, and that's something that even I I struggle with even to this day. Like I have a hard time, you know, saying my name to people. So and goals can focus on those things. And you as a speech therapist, or if you're a person who stutters, your speech therapist can help you work on these things and help you feel more confident communicating in these different environments. And then lastly, I want to kind of drive home on this page about like considering the message you're sending a person who stutters when you are focusing and teaching them about fluency shaping or stuttering modification strategies, right? Consider that message you're sending when that is the focus of your treatment, right? You know, in my opinion, that is a very kind of counterintuitive message you're sending, right? You're telling, I mean, considering what we know about stuttering, we know it's something that can't be fixed. It's, you know, there is a neurological component, which lets us know like there's no strategy that's going to rewire how the brain is wired, right? So if you are focusing your time with your student, just teaching them, okay, here's a strategy, you're going to use it. Here's this one, just use it. You know, here's this one, use that one, and that'll help you stop stuttering, right? That is, it's very counterintuitive, and you know, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. The message is not the greatest in my opinion. And fluency shouldn't be the goal. Like it shouldn't be the goal to get a child, get a student, or get an adult, or get an individual to stop stuttering, to, you know, get their stuttering to, you know, less than 5% in a 10-minute speech sample. Like that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be, you know, they will, you know, gain the confidence to effectively communicate in whatever setting, or, you know, however that looks like for them. So my last point with that is there is a recent article that came out not too long ago. It was like either 1 or 2 years ago, and it's called a viewpoint about fluency, and it's a it is a research article, and it interviewed, I think it was like it was somewhere between like 60 and 70 adults who stutter, who went through speech therapy some point in their lives. And, you know, and overwhelmingly, they all had kind of this very similar things to say about their speech therapist who only focused on, you know, fluency shaping and stuttering modification, and how basically kind of, you know, messed with their confidence in communicating, and, you know, just and a whole plethora of things. So I would really highly recommend everybody here, you know, look at that article, and yeah.
Microaggressions. I love to talk about this. Essentially, this is from Google, but it's a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as racial or ethnic minority. Essentially, what this is, it's when people, whether intentionally or not, say something about your speech, and it just, I like to put it, I like to say that it makes people feel very like icky, because it could be something like someone's stuttering on their name, and someone goes, "Oh, did you forget your name?" Or you're trying to say something and people just kind of like laugh a bit, like not necessarily like at you, but just like, "Oh, haha, you're like tripping over your words," because that's something that everyone does, but they don't realize that you are actually having a moment of stuttering. And this is super tricky to change, just because as of right now, only 1% of the world stutters. And I feel like a lot of those people too are covert, meaning they try to hide it. So we don't really see a lot of stuttering out in the world. So, I mean, how do we change this? I guess just like making sure that stuttering is seen in social media, TV, movies, just making sure that people know exactly what it is and what's happening. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, but Mark O'Malia, he wrote a really great blog article about it. And if you are interested, I would probably highly recommend checking this out. But to talk about that, next slide, CJ. Okay, so have you, as people who stutter, experienced any of these, and how did you respond? So these stories can be pretty interesting. So please feel free, if you are a person who stutters, to talk about this. But for me, the one that I always tell, I was 16 and I went to go pick up my car from the shop. And of course, they asked me, like, oh, hi, ma'am, like, what is your name? And we'll get your keys. And long story short, I went to go say, oh, Lauren Schlemmer. And the guy looked at me, kind of paused, kind of smiled a bit, and he goes, oh, Chia. And so it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, I'll give him props for creativity, but you can't really say that to people. And then that makes you feel bad then. So back then when I was 16, I did not really respond to it. I just kind of like laughed it off. But nowadays I would probably say like, hey, no, like I actually am a person who stutters. That was what was happening there. And it might make them feel bad about what they said, or it might not. But that's just a good example of what people who stutter go through constantly. So does anyone else who stutters have a story they want to share?
Well, I can go next. I mean, this just happened to me last week, and I was in an IEP meeting, and I went to go and introduce myself, and I stuttered a lot. I stuttered a lot my name, and one of the members of the team kind of laughed a little bit, and like and just kind of like smirked and kind of laughed a little bit at me, um, or just laughed a little bit, and and I won't lie, like after that, like I couldn't stop thinking about that. Like that kind of sucks, like to be laughed at. Like, and even if I mean I know that they weren't. I mean, I assume that they weren't, you know, being, yeah, I assume that they weren't like trying to be like rude about it. Like, they were just kind of like laughing at it. But it was one of those things that like I kept thinking about that, like, the rest of the day, like, wow, like I got laughed at, by another adult. And and that hasn't been like the only time. Like stuff like that has happened to me a lot. So yeah. Does anybody else have any examples or anything that has happened to you?
I have someone in the chat. Teresa goes, introducing myself at IUP meetings has been stressing me out. Me too.
Same here.
It's common thing here, I guess. But yeah, and I will say, if people do not know that you do stutter, they're more inclined to make like comments and stuff. There have been a few times where I've just felt like I've been having a day where I'm just stuttering a lot. And when I say like, hey, I'm Lauren Schlemmer, and then I'll add kind of something on like, hey, just so you know, I am a person who stutters. So if you hear any repetitions or hesitations in my speech, that's what that is. So I feel like sometimes when I kind of say that, it kind of gives myself permission to stutter. I have someone else here too. Meeting another person who stutters. Oh, it just cut me off. All right, meeting another person who stutters for the first time and thinking, oh my gosh, it keeps cutting me off. I'm sorry. for the first time and thinking they are mocking me. Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. And then another one, kids often report having the server at a restaurant ask their parents what they want after the child has a hard time saying it for themselves. Yep. And then Wally again said nothing and realized they were a fellow person who stutters. Yeah. Yeah. I will also say super quick too, before we move on, stuttering was represented very well recently in the HBO show, The Penguin. In it, there is a character who stutters and who was actually trained by an actual, sorry, the actor was trained by a person who stutters. So it's represented really, really well. And in the one scene, the person who stutters is trying to order food, and the waiter keeps like trying to fill in his sentences for him, and then the penguin kind of steps in and says, hey, like, let him talk, he can talk, kind of thing. And I feel like that was super cool because you really don't see a lot of that in TV, and so that was pretty cool. Deborah goes, why not just hire an actor who stutters? That's a very good point, Deborah. That would be great.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you know, like how I really appreciate how the Penguin has done that, because for me, like one of the first things that come to my mind when it comes to stuttering stuttering as it's represented in the media are, you know, that scene in My Cousin Vinny, where they were all making fun of him for stuttering, or, you know, Forrest Gump, right? Like those are what I think about and what I remember seeing about stuttering in the media. So it was really cool to see how the Penguin kind of shown like a different part of stuttering. So yeah. So this one is more towards our SLPs, or if we do have any parents in here, have you observed any microaggressions when it comes to your students or, you know, your child, and, you know, what did you do about it, or, you know, did you step in and so forth?
I do encounter, sorry, one second. It keeps going out for me. I do encounter teachers who talk down to young children who stutter as if they have a comprehension issue. Yeah, that's tough too. And that kind of all goes back to the education piece there too. So,
and you know what, to add to that, so I mean, like I had mentioned before, like I do a lot of observations, especially for my students who stutter, because, you know, like it's good to see how they are in, you know, in their classroom environment. And one of the last times I observed a student, you know, this is the same student that was trying to explain something to the teacher, and the teacher like cut her off like midway while she was trying to say what she was trying to say, and like had tapped on her paper and asked her to write down what she was saying. And like when I saw that, like I really had to fight myself to jump in and say, wait, hold up, don't do that. Like let her say what she wants to say. I really had to, because, like, you know, and that was something like the student and I like talked about afterwards, like how she felt about it, and she was very open to me. Like she felt kind of, and I can't remember the exact word that she had used, but she had mentioned that like she kind of felt a little bit slighted by that, because it was kind of rude that her teacher just kind of like cut her off and like made her, you know, made her write down what she was trying to tell her. So that's something like I mean, you know, and this happened last week, so I'm still trying to figure out how to approach this with the teacher. So so yeah, it's, you know, they're out there, and I'm willing to bet just about every single person who stutters has experienced some type of microaggression at some point in their life. So, and that's that part of that experience of stuttering. Okay, so our next one is what does it mean to be an ally of a person who stutters? So this one, well, I thought we kind of leave it open to the group. Like, what to you, what does it mean to be an ally to either your student who stutters or, just anybody who stutters?
I can start. I would say probably just listening, not filling in their sentences for them, being open to listening to the person who stutters talk and tell them about what's stuttering is. And I think just being aware that, what we should be doing when we're talking to people who stutter versus what we should not. Um, I also think one more too, if I probably just gave away all of them. But I think too, just really trying to spread awareness, because still stuttering is not one of those things that people know about. They only kind of really see it on TV shows, movies. So really just making sure that we're kind of spreading it out and about. Pam said, telling a group that, hey, this person hasn't shared yet. That's good. Yep. Not leaving people out. Deborah, help educate the world about stuttering so that people who stutter aren't the only ones explaining themselves. Yes, I like that, because I feel like a lot of times people who stutter have this huge responsibility to kind of share that, because we're the only ones who experience it, and also quote unquote normalize stuttering.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things that somebody can do to be an ally is by asking questions, like asking, the person who stutters, like, what would you prefer when it comes to things like, finishing finishing a sentence. Like, I I know, like, some people who stutter like actually would like that in certain situations. Like if they are really having a hard time saying what they're wanting to say and they know that their best friend knows exactly what they're wanting to say, like just kind of, helping them out in that way, right? Some people who stutter might want that, while other people who stutter might get annoyed at that. So I think just being open to like having that having that communication with that person who stutters, I think is a big key. Like asking them, okay, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do if we're out in a restaurant and the waiter is being kind of rude to you or is laughing at you? Like, do you want me to step in and kind of, want me to step in and say something to them, or, or not? Like some people, everybody is different, and every person who stutters is different. So
Yes, in the chat, someone said being a penguin. Yep, I like that. And then not interrupting or finishing a person who stutters sentences. Teresa goes, I have a student who likes when her friends tells her to slow down. I know a lot of people who stutter don't like that though. Yeah. And that it really depends on the person. So
yeah, good. Okay.
All right, this is a chart that we kind of created. It's super important. So the language that we use from SLPs versus people who stutter is super important. Just because, kind of as we were like talking about before, say you have a student who comes into speech, they're so excited to tell you about this Halloween trunk or treat thing that they did over the weekend, and you're working on strategies, and they tell you everything, but they're like stuttering quite a bit, and there's quite a bit of tension too. And instead of saying like, oh wow, that's so cool and so fun, you say, hey, let's try that again, but with a strategy. Oof, that kind of makes that student feel like, ooh, like you weren't listening to anything that I said. You were only trying to figure out if I was fluent or not. So really making sure that when you are in speech, you are that person's person to talk to, and you are listening, and you are really just encouraging positive communication. So I do have a few examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. But then the language people who stutter use, I've been kind of trying to watch myself too, because we do have a habit of saying like, yeah, like my stutter was horrible this weekend. But really, we don't mean that. We don't want to think of stuttering as a bad thing, right? Because then it'll just keep snowballing. We want to think of it as factual. So my stuttering was more this weekend. I had more tension, right? Kind of call it what it is and not, making it seem like this really bad thing. Um, but yeah, we have quite a few of these. Like I said, I'm not going to go over them, but I think it's super, super important. And it is really easy to kind of trip up sometimes. But I love this quote. I don't know who this is from, but it's your brain is listening to you. So whatever you tell yourself, you increase. So if we're saying this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, our brain's going to keep making it more and more and more.
So this is just kind of our last slide, and this is just some tips on how anybody can be an ally to a person who stutters. So this can pertain to if you are a speech therapist. These are some tips that you can give to maybe your teachers or your parents or other kids, and so forth. So when it comes to like things to not to do, right? Obviously we say, try not to either tell them or ask them to use a strategy when they are having those overt stuttering moments. That because then like just like Lauren said, like that can make a person who stutters feel like, well, you weren't really listening to anything I was saying. You didn't really care about anything I was having to say. You're just trying to get a percentage out of me or whatever, right? Another thing is, try not to point it out too much. I think especially in just like, conversation. Now, I will say though, in speech therapy, I think it is good to like explore maybe some of those moments of stuttering. So you can, especially if they're talking a lot and they're having a lot of tension, a lot of stuttering. Like you can say, "Oh, I really love what you had to say. I noticed that some of that was a little bit harder to get out. What do you think? Especially for a student who maybe is still kind of building that awareness around stuttering, that can help them kind of grow their awareness. Like, oh yeah, I was stuttering a lot there, and I felt tension in my throat, or I felt tension in my hands. Um, try not to fill in their words or fill in their words or fill in their words or interrupt them. That's one thing I tell is because I do a lot of I do a lot of groups for a lot of groups for my students, and one of the first things like that I told them was like, while we are in here, like everybody will get to say what they want to say, and let's try hard not to interrupt anybody in here. Because then that gives them the comfort of being able to say what they want to say. And then, don't 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 treat it like it's taboo, like it's stuttering. It's just a difference in how we speak. So yeah, and Lauren, if you want to do the do side.
Yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, you want to keep eye contact, be patient. Patient is key. I know there are some times when I get stuck where I feel like it goes on and on and on. And in my head, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is never going to end. This is never going to end. But it does end. But having someone who's just very patient, it really helps. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable too to keep going. Be open to talking about it. Family too. Um, me personally, my family didn't really talk about it a lot when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. So I felt like it was this very like taboo topic, and I didn't feel like I had anyone else to talk to about it. So that really helps too. We already kind of talked about this, creating a safe space for stuttering, and then community too. Seriously, I'm telling you, if you tell your kids or your clients to join an NSA group, take a look at Friends. There are a lot of different organizations that really help to build that community aspect, and it really helps out. And then last one, call it stuttering. I'm currently rereading Harry Potter, and I found this quote and I thought it fit perfectly. But basically, Dumbledore tells Harry to call him Voldemort. Always use the proper name for things, because fear of a name increases the fear of the thing itself. So if you are scared to call it what it is, like I don't want to call it stuttering, then it just makes this big whole thing where you're scared of it. So I like to, take it like head on, right? We want to make sure we call it what it is, so that doesn't have as much control over you.
And here's some here are some resources that you guys can check out. That just like Pam had said at the beginning, this is recorded, so please feel free to go and check out some of these things. Some different websites, some books, and some podcasts that are really very informative to listen to and to explore. This is just kind of our reference page. This is kind of all of the research that we kind of use to create this PowerPoint. So again, feel free, if you're one of those that really likes to kind of look into the research and read that stuff. I would highly recommend you kind of look through some of these. And yeah, that was our last one. So sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
to say, Wally did have a question. Any differences in adults versus teens / children who stutter? There's a yeah. I feel like it just depends where they're at in their stuttering journey. Some people are ready to talk about it, and some people are not. Um, I don't know, I feel like it just depends what they're willing to do / talk about in therapy. Um, a lot of times we'll see kids who don't want to do anything in therapy, and
Yeah.
that's fine. And then a lot of times, usually adults who are in therapy, they are very determined and they want to make a change. So that's kind of just generally speaking.
Yeah. And I know, and when it comes to children, like, because I guess children stutter, that can be broken up into pediatric population who stutters, and then that children from like 5 to 8 or 9, 10 who stutter. And there is a little bit of a difference. And honestly, that could be a whole nother like 3 hour long talk about kind of, the pe about like the differences there. But in turn, just like Lauren said, like it really, what matters is like the client's willingness to participate, and their how receptive they are to it. Yeah, like some of my teenagers who stutter, like no matter how much I talk to them about this stuff, like it's not clicking because they don't really care. So yeah. But yeah, thank you all for coming. This is really fun for us.
Thank you so much for this presentation, Lauren and CJ. Fantastic job. So thank you again. And thank you all who attended.
Thank you guys.
Yes, thank you guys.